GM, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Loud and clear. How you
Awesome.
doing, friend?
Doing well, doing well. How are you guys?
Doing good. Can't complain. Tank is wrapping up a haircut at the moment.
Aren't we all?
Getting snazzy. And then, is there, I think, are we planning on anyone else from your team, or I think it's just you today, right? So we're waiting
Yeah.
on Avi at this point. Cool. I'll send him a quick ping. Then we can dive in. But how you doing today?
Doing well, doing well. Bunch of calls today, but excited for this one.
Interesting. Yeah, the same. Thursday has seemed to become my call day this week and meeting day.
All right, I'm back. Sorry about that, guys.
Oh, all good. Hope you're looking snazzy. So did you just
I
hop
don't
on,
know if I, I don't know
hop
if I
on the
look
space?
snazzy, but I feel snazzy now.
Did you just hop on the space in the barber chair and go, hold on a second?
Well, yeah, I tried to time it to where I could be done, but yeah, I was, I tried to do it where I could time it where, I'd be done before, but barbers like to talk. You know how it goes.
Yeah. No worries, no worries. Cool. So while we wait on Avi and a couple other people to trickle in, we're going to be skipping our crypto sort of news section this week. I think we have plenty to talk about with the SEDA team here, so we'll probably take up the full hour easily. On that note, however, a cool update that is coming to ICI is sort of generalized news headline aggregation. So whether it's posted on CoinMarketCap, I'm suddenly blanking because all of Cointelegraph, the million different news things that cover crypto or traditional news sites, as long as it's a crypto related headline, we'll be sort of pulling those into our resource hub so you can quickly kind of see what's going on at a glance and jump over to those full articles. So that should help people stay up to date with everything going on in this insane industry that we're all part of. And there's Avi. Look at that. Perfect timing. Cool. So Tank, curious, how much do you know about SEDA? I'm kind of hoping not that much.
I was going to say, I actually don't know all too much. We talked about it briefly. I started looking at it, but I purposely, you know how it is. I purposely like to learn as we have these spaces. So, I'm excited to hear more.
Perfect. Cool. I'm a bit more educated than usual with our guests, just because, as people know, I'm a huge Chainlink fan. That actually comes less from being a maxi for that project and more being an Oracle fan, as well as just infrastructure projects in general. I think they're immensely important and one of the things that are really going to let Web3 go to the next levels, plural, whatever those may be. And SEDA is a fantastic example of that. Additionally, they're intent-based. I'm working with the Shogun team right now, which is using intents for more direct DeFi purposes, and it's all just really fascinating stuff. So excited to jump in today. I think, Avi, do we have you successfully connected? We get a mic test? Avi, try maybe
that good old Twitter rug, man.
Oh yeah, look at that. And now he's back to connecting mode. That's all right, cool. Let's dive in while he probably just restart the Twitter app and we'll get it working. Jasper, let me turn it over to you just for a little intro of yourself, a little context, background in Web3, and maybe how SEDA started and your involvement.
Of course, yeah. So I'm one of the co-founders of SEDA. Before I started working on oracles, me and my co-founder were building sort of like on the consumer app side, and we kept running into missing infrastructure pieces that were necessary in order for us to build what we actually want to build. And so we just kept building infrastructure pieces ourselves. So what that looked like is we were building this app for derivatives on startups, but the sort of like open market protocols that were out there back then were insufficient, too expensive, and not, in today's terms, modular enough, I'd say. So we built this open market protocol called Flux Protocol, but then we wanted to settle those markets, and we're looking in sort of like the Oracle landscape and came to the conclusion that it was very hard to use a third party to settle these markets. So we started to focus on building oracles. This is a few years back. Time in crypto is a little bit of a it's a little bit of a conundrum. Like
It goes
like
fast
4 years
and
ago,
slow.
probably.
Yeah, it goes fast and slow at the same time, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty wild. It's pretty wild. So, so we started building Oracle. So we built two Oracle products. One of them was an optimistic Oracle. For those of you that know of UMA, it was similar to that. But we built it in like a modular fashion, so you could access it basically from like any contract. Basically ask it like subjective questions, not intersubjective, but just subjective. And the second Oracle was a first party Oracle, which is like you plug data providers into the chain directly or into a contract directly, and they just push data on chain sort of like blindly, right? And that second product was actually quite successful. At the peak of the last bull, we were securing over 3.6 billion in total value secured across like a bunch of DeFi protocols and a bunch of chains. However, we started noticing that the time it took for us and the energy like was super linear to add new chains. So that means that for every new chain that we added, we needed to either hire somebody or we need to like sleep less and less and less. And it was just completely unscalable and very stressful. So we came to the conclusion that we were about to either become another Chainlink, which like has like super tight restrictions around like what change they can launch out when and why. Or we'd have to come up with a technological solution that would allow us to scale to an infinite amount of chains, hopefully, right? Because this is like 2.5 years ago, we saw this direction the space was going of like many chains, and we didn't expect it to go this fast with the fragmentation of Ethereum, but we knew it was bound to happen. And so, yeah, we made the bet on like trying to, come up with a technology that commoditizes access to real world data without there being gatekeepers or kingmakers that are able to say like, hey, this chain has access and this chain doesn't, because it truly is core infrastructure. Like there's no protocol or rollup that can exist without oracles. We can dive a little bit deeper into why that is, or like what an oracle is, in my opinion, later. But before that, just another side note. Like I was building L2 infrastructure before, like L2 research on Plasma back in the day in 2018, funded by EF. So that's a little bit of a background of like what SEDA is, why SEDA exists, and how we got here.
Perfect. That's perfect background. Super quick, just to sort of give some context here, and we'll just go for a short answer here, and then I actually want to turn it over to Avi, let him say hello. Title of this space, Exploring the Future of Oracles. Would you even consider that accurate? Do you guys consider yourself an oracle, or is there maybe a better, more encompassing term?
I think oracle is the perfect term, but it's been captured a little bit.
Gotcha.
So oracles, people just think of price feeds nowadays, right? However, I think the category of oracles is much broader. I'd say like any data that's outside of a blockchain's execution environments, if you write a smart contract you do not have access to, requires an oracle solution. And that includes application-specific oracles, such as price feed oracles, like Slinky, for example, or, interoperability solutions that allows you to query cross-chain state, such like a Hyperlane or Layer 0, right? So you have this is a distinction. And then there's many more use cases, but those are like the two most prominent examples of what I would call application-specific oracles.
Cool. Okay. I always like to ask some form of that question because terminology evolves in this space as fast as the tech. I think it's important to keep up to date. But Avi, looks like you're fully connected. For a little context, Avi helped connect us with SEDA Protocol to make this happen today. Long-term friend of ICI. How are you doing, my friend?
Pretty good, man. Having some Twitter struggles, so I apologize. But I'm doing well. I'm excited to have Jasper here. We were chatting a little bit in Telegram earlier. Turns out we're both degenerates, and we both still invest in Ponzi's, which is kind of fun. But we're here to talk about oracles, so we'll try and stay on topic a little bit. I don't know if you mind, Timmy, but like I kind of wanted to do even just like a quick kind of let's set some definitions for terms, because SEDA has a lot of like terminology. Like the first time I was reading through all their docs, I was like, wow, there's a lot of like new kind of words that I need to kind of learn. And so I think what might be a good starting point is to just kind of do like an overview of the architecture, because there's like quite a few moving parts, and I know they have their, like technical roadmap rollout that just came out. So maybe we can kind of discuss, Jasper, like what the different elements of the network are and kind of like how they all fit into the big picture.
Sure thing. So I think let's start at the source. Let's start at the top of the funnel, where we have data providers. So this is people that have a data set that would be considered valuable to be consumed by smart contracts. So I don't know, like price feed providers, exchanges, people that hold RPC data. I don't know, people doing CK block header verification, real world asset providers, etc. So these are data providers that want to essentially sell their data to smart contract protocols. So that's the top of the funnel. We allow these data providers to plug into our network by running a little piece of software, which essentially opens up their API to be queried by smart contracts. Then we have the sort of like most visible component to users of SEDA, I'd say, today, and that's the SEDA chain. And the SEDA chain is a Cosmos SDK based chain that is used for checkpointing and settlement of data and stake. So it's an application-specific network. It doesn't allow for any smart contracts or modules to be deployed there by anybody than the network itself. This network also allows people to deploy new feeds. So instead of being able to deploy a smart contract on Ethereum, for example, or Solana, people can come to SEDA, write a set of instructions, and deploy that set of instructions to the SEDA chain. That set of instructions essentially is meant to dictate what data is to be queried from where, and what computations should be done to aggregate that data into a consumable outcome by their application. That data is executed by another fancy term, which we call the overlay network, which is a network of query and compute worker nodes that essentially get elected to run these feeds on a per push basis. So the network uses verifiable randomness functions to select a subset of worker nodes. These worker nodes are essentially just a wrapper around a VM. And that VM just blindly executes the data feed program that the user deployed to the network. So you have like, let's say 10 nodes. They all query the exact same data from the same places, perform the same aggregation function. So the data should be relatively uniform after that point. They then post that data back to the SEDA chain, where all of it's collected in the end of a block. It is Merkleized and signed, which allows another actor in the stack, solvers, to then collect that root, the Merkle root, and the signed Merkle root, and distribute that to any chain. And that gives essentially any chain the ability to verify Oracle state from a smart contract that's deployed on their state without us having to deploy there. So all you need is a smart contract that can parse and verify our Merkle root and state proof. And essentially you're able to, just like how IBC works, but in a one-way street, essentially verify, sort of like network state and
So
Yes.
is it for that reason that the only requirements are to be able to deploy a smart contract with those requirements, I say, rather than any requirement around language, such as,
Yes.
COSM, WASM, verse,
Exactly.
whatever language, and that's what makes you guys sort of truly chain agnostic. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah, as long as you can deploy a smart contract that can verify one of the curves we support, cryptographic curves we support, you are able to access our data. That's completely correct.
Okay, awesome. And then please go on if you had more. One term, though, I think would be awesome to go over just because people have heard it a lot, but I don't think most people have their heads wrapped around it, is just intents in general.
Yes.
Maybe how an intent-based oracle differs from one of the more traditional ones.
Yes, definitely. I think so with a traditional oracle, you essentially have pre-programmed feeds that are either push or pull based. And if you want to add to those feeds, you have to ask the Oracle provider to please add support, which is pretty tough. Also, they also dictate like where that data lives, and where it can be accessed from and how. With SEDA, you essentially post an intent to the network saying like, hey, I wish this program or this set of instructions to be executed, and I don't care exactly how it works as long as it gets executed and ends up on my chain in a verifiable way. Maybe to take a step back, what an intent is the way most people describe it is like, instead of telling a machine exactly what to do and like expecting that machine to do that, you tell the machine what you want and let some third party figure out how to best do that, right? And that way you can create sort of like competition.
The way I liked it explained is just with like a simple swap, kind of is what made it clear to me when it was explained this way, where let's say you're doing a multi-step swap that involves maybe a bridge and something. What traditionally happens in DeFi right now is, whatever protocol you do it, you would send out a message that says something like, swap this coin for that coin on this DEX within this slippage range, then bridge it using this bridge to that chain, and then swap that coin for this coin within this slippage. Whereas an intent would just be, I have this coin on this chain, I want it turned into that coin on that chain, I don't really care how, whatever the best rate, speed, price, etc. The intent is just that I want this swap to happen. I don't care about the details. Is that a good way to explain it?
I think that's a great example.
Yeah. I think it's has a lot of potential to kind of revolutionize Web3 just because it's more dynamic. Okay, cool.
I think solver competition and solver specialization just creates super efficient mechanisms. And you're sort of like saying like, hey, you like set off arbitrary executors or people that like solvers, like, hey, however you think this is the best way to do it, like even if it goes through a SEX, like a centralized exchange, like as long as it ends up in my wallet on the destination chain, I don't care. And if you can get a better spread on the conversion rate because you can route it smarter than what I would be able to come up with, then good for you. My intent settled anyway.
Yeah, and so then applying that to oracles, kind of looping back around, in the traditional model with something like Chainlink, if you're a synthetic asset protocol or Aave, really anything that say you need a price feed for off-chain asset A or even on-chain asset B, but Chainlink does not have one explicitly set up for that, you're kind of out of luck. You would have to, ask them to or try and get that working. Whereas with SEDA, it's a bit more flexible in that particular asset doesn't have to have a pre-set up oracle for it. You can just submit your intent that you want it as a feed, and people sort of, the solvers bid on it. Is that correct?
Yep. So essentially you can say like, hey, I want this to be queried, right? Like, I want this data to be accessible. And then you have not solvers bid on it, but solvers essentially, so there's two, so the solvers really come into play in, the delivery of the messages, right? Both to SEDA saying like, hey, I want, price feed XYZ to be queried, and relaying the answers back to the, consumer chain. So those places are where solvers come in. So I can post an intent on base, right? For example, saying like, hey, I want the price of ETH to be queried from these like 20 sources. And you essentially just put that message out there with a bounty, right? What a solver will do is a solver will then pass, that message to SEDA saying like, hey, listen, like, this user wants data XYZ. Wants the ETH price. And they will pay a fee in SEDA, to get that data queried. Then that data gets executed by our overlay network. It comes back on chain. And then the solver is again incentivized to then also publish that data on the destination chain, to claim the bounty, essentially, right? So what happened there is that a user came in, they posted a bounty with an intent saying like, hey, I want this data on a consumer chain, like the base, and said, we'll just wait now because our intent has been, made clear. And somebody was like, okay, I can easily fetch this data for you or get this data fetched for you, notified SEDA, and responds with a, with a proof of the ETH price, as they wanted. So yeah, in the eyes of a user, they just said like, hey, I want this data, and it just magically appears.
Oh, that's awesome example. Perfect. Avi, go ahead.
I was going to say, my understanding of the intents was that it was kind of like with respect to SEDA kind of being more of like a data marketplace. So like, if you don't have a data provider providing that data, that the solvers can't really do anything about that. Are you saying that the solvers can actually express to the data providers like, hey, we want this data that you're not providing yet?
No. So that would be something that would happen in a back room or like over email, I guess. But no. So the data, there does have to be data available, whether it's through public APIs or private APIs that are plugged into the network. You're completely correct there. And it's still the data request. So the intent still has to, reference a binary that includes like instructions on where data has to be queried from, and etc. On the SEDA chain side. So that you're accurate, Avi.
Right. So okay. So if we can kind of like go top to bottom, there's like, this SEDA proof of stake chain. This is where consensus happens. This is our like single source of truth. You have these data providers that are like the supply side of things. They're the ones that are feeding data into the SEDA network in order to monetize it. And so basically the solvers kind of act as like on the consumer side. If like an app wants that data, then the solver's job is to basically fulfill the intent of the application. And so you have these apps that are like, hey, I want prices for ETH. The solvers figure out a way to get that over to them. And then you kind of have, I guess, like this overlay network that is kind of in between. And that's the one that's kind of querying and computing data from like multiple different sources, because I guess like you can have many people providing the ETH price, and in order to come to an agreement on what it actually is, I'm assuming you kind of have to like check them against each other. Is that right?
Yep. So what you do, so I mean, that's all up to the consumer or the person that writes the logic for the data feed. They can choose what they consider to be a secure data query for that specific asset, right?
That's interesting.
Yes.
So they can kind of pick their level of, let's say, security versus speed and price, or the user gets to define this based on
exactly. I think speed in that trade-off should be negligible, but it's price and security. Yep, that's what you're trading off there, and users can choose to trade off any way they want, right? For some use cases like VRFs or other things that have like cryptographic guarantees, right? Like because the data providers also sign the data. So if you really trust some data provider, you can just choose to only have one node query that data provider and just return you a signed price, right? So that's one way to do it. But if you want redundancy, then you can also have 100 different sources queried, take the median, and just return that.
And so I guess one way I'm curious, because, I'm assuming like people like Chainlink who probably kind of rake in the money because they have a bit of a monopoly on things, like can't be too excited about this, but at the same time, it's kind of like an inevitable evolution of how feeds are going to work. So is it true that like this doesn't necessarily like destroy their competitive advantage? It just kind of levels the playing field for like other people who want to be data providers, or how does that kind of work? Like, are they incentivized to participate in this?
So how I see it is for the foreseeable future, Chainlink is still going to have a very strong position for the sort of like blue chip price feeds on the blue chip chains. But the thing is that there's always certain blue chip chains that develop in cycles that were hard to predict, right? And I think it is unfair to have a single entity decide on which change they think will be like a success in order to allow their developers to access like tooling that's very, very, very important for their system to operate. Like without an Oracle, no devs are going to build on your chain, right? There's not going to be any liquidity. There's not going to be devs building. There's not going to be any DeFi. Like, you're just screwed. So our idea is that even though Chainlink might remain like super strongly positioned on some of the more obvious chains, we want to allow sort of like the long tail of chains, which is very much growing, like the bell curve of where liquidity lives in crypto is flattening out quite aggressively, I'd say. So we want to be able, if you spin up a chain tomorrow, which is becoming more and more easy, you should have access to Oracle data. You should not be begging or paying 7 to 8 figures for some entity to please support you within 6 months, right? That's just insane. That's not a decentralized internet at all. Like we're just doing the same thing as we were doing in Web 2 at that point with gatekeepers and API access.
Right.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah. And so, yeah, no, absolutely. Because really what it sounds like is like you're going to kind of use those long tail chains to prove your proof of concept. And, over a period of time, once people realize like, oh, this works and it's, you create kind of like a robust marketplace for data, then like, who knows, maybe at that point, Chainlink and other big data providers will want to get involved, but it doesn't really matter because people, even like maybe apps like Aave deployed on Ethereum mainnet, can even use SEDA as like a supplement to their Chainlink deployment, or could migrate altogether if they decide to. And then like Chainlink has to make a decision of like, do we want to remain competitive or not? But that's like, maybe a year more down the line.
That will be some fun game theory there. I think you're definitely right. And I see sort of like, if we do this right and every new chain launches with the SEDA Oracle built in, the goal is to become like the standard for data querying, right? And as soon as you have people use your standards to access data on all of these new chains, like that's my goal. Then I've won, right? I just want to become, even if it like eventually Chainlink tries to do something similar and like they have people now using Chainlink's intent Oracle and it uses our interfaces, like I still feel like we've achieved what we wanted to achieve.
I was actually just gonna ask, is there a world where sort of traditional Oracle models and an intent-based one like yours can actually cooperate? Or maybe not the models themselves, but let's say I'm a data provider for Chainlink.
Yeah.
Since I already have some of that infrastructure, would it sort of be in my best interest to also now provide for SEDA?
I think it makes total sense to have the Chainlink validator set also become a data provider and basically plug into Chainlink's mechanism and you just use SEDA as a distribution mechanism. I think that makes total sense. I'll leave it there.
Oh, Jasper was about to either leak some alpha or say something important. He stopped himself.
Yeah. Yes.
Tank, do you have any questions, or do you want to? I saw you dropped off, probably got disconnected. Did you want to ask anything so far?
No. I'm just really intently listening.
I was just seeing a DM from Tank that said his mic wasn't working.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Sorry, I am having a little bit of connection issues.
Yeah, something going on with Twitter today for Tank or in general, but Tank, if you are here,
that's all good.
Did you want to jump in, or no? Okay.
Can you not hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm just sitting here. I'm sorry. I'm being quiet because I am obviously having issues. But it's really interesting stuff, man. I was just messaging Timmy on the back end. It's really interesting and intently listening to what you guys are talking about. But no, please carry on. I'm just I want to learn more.
Let's go.
Cool. Jasper, did you wanna pivot to talk a little bit about chain abstraction? I know that's something that you're passionate about and something it's kind of like a big ticket item for SEDA to kind of address.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I mean, I think with this conversation, maybe people are already able to make out a little bit why this makes sense. First of all, every serious chain abstraction solution leverages intent, because it's kind of the point. I think where SEDA comes in, which is a beautiful sort of tool for this chain abstraction solution, is once again the fact that we can be deployed and get access to data of any chain without you having to do politics and have gather support from a community in order to get an Oracle provider or a bridge to launch there, right? So if I am building a C8, oops, just dropped my laptop. If I am building a chain abstraction protocol and I know that I need to verify data from many, many, many chains, and the data today is fragmented across tens of bridges, if not 100 bridges, SEDA is really a breath of fresh air, simply because you can use the same standard to access all of the data. So you'll be able to guaranteed get access to any new chain you want to support, or basically you won't have real chain abstraction would result in a user being able to interact with any chain from one entry point, right? And in order to do that, you need data from any chain to be able to be accessed, and no Oracle or bridge does this today. And I think that is very bullish as a positioning for us as we sort of enter this new narrative. I don't know how familiar you guys are with chain abstraction, what projects you guys are looking into, what your view is on it.
I believe it is, in a general sense, taking it more as a term than anything too specific to a single piece of code. I think is one of the things that may truly lead to web mass adoption, because one of the most common things I see with new-ish users, and I say ish because even some people that have been in crypto for a year or more, is they don't still fully grasp the basics of things like coins are not in your wallet. they're on a chain. There are different chains you need to move between, what wrapped assets are, all these sorts of things. So I think chain abstraction is something I follow pretty closely. Every time I hear it, it's one of the few buzzwords I actually pay attention to. It means different things for different projects, but I'm extremely excited to see that general concept take over Web3.
Yeah, I think it's a bit
Jasper, can you maybe speak to like specific examples? Because like I think I have an understanding of the general term chain abstraction, and I'm kind of having like a hard time wrapping my mind around like what some examples would be. Like we talked a little bit about like a swap being executed, but like I'm curious about what you said earlier, which is like if you want to query data on another chain, like why would a protocol, for example, want to do that? Because like in my head, I'm thinking of like, let's say you're a lending market on Arbitrum and you have a borrower that wants to borrow like more money than you actually have.
Yep.
Like, but you have like deployments on like mainnet and OP and like other places, and maybe like there's still liquidity available there.
Yeah.
Like, does this kind of like, am I going down the right path with this? Like, would you be able to maybe like, it's like depending on how your pools are set up, like be able to direct them to other places to fulfill that need?
You are very close. You're very close. However, I would say it's slightly different. So there's many flavors of chain abstraction, and there's many different styles of solutions. So what I'm going to try to do is paint a picture of a straightforward one that I'm going to come up with on the spot. Okay. So I'm a user. I have funds on ETH and I have funds on Optimism. What I do is I deposit these funds on ETH and Optimism into my chain abstraction enabled account, right? So let's say I have 2 ETH on Ethereum and 1 ETH on Optimism. So now I have like a rolled up balance of like 3 ETH somewhere, right? So there is a method through which intent solvers can verify that I'm good for 3 ETH worth of transactions on other chains. What I then do is I can issue an intent which essentially locks up. So let's say we don't do cross-chain swap, right? So we have 1 ETH on Optimism and we want to swap it to 4,000 USDC on Arbitrum, right? So we issue an intent saying like, hey, listen, I have 1 ETH and I want to sell it for 4,000 Arbitrum USDC. What happens is that a solver will see this intent and they will essentially issue a short-term loan of this 1 ETH on Arbitrum. They will sell one of their ETH for 4,000 USDC, or maybe they have 4,000 USDC on Arbitrum already. Doesn't matter actually. But let's say for the sake of the steps that are logical, the solver sells 1 ETH on Arbitrum, and they can even then long it on like a Binance perp to stay delta neutral, for example. But then
this just clicked.
Yeah.
It just clicked. Oh, wow. Okay. That's amazing.
Yes.
Okay. So funds don't need to actually move between chains as long as somebody else has the funds to fulfill them on the chain that it needs to okay. All right. So you don't even need a bridge.
Nope.
Like you could just transact cross chain by like, it's almost like yelling at your neighbor and being like, hey man, like I need to borrow your lawnmower or whatever.
Your wife, yeah. No, sorry. So we're almost we're almost at the point where oracles come in, right? So now the solver has sold 1 ETH for 4,000 USDC, and they have provided it to the account, the chain abstracted account of the initial intent issuer, right? So the intent issuer now has their 4,000 USDC on Arbitrum. Well, great. However, the solver just sold an ETH. How is he going to get his money back? Right? So the solver has to now prove on Optimism that he fulfilled the intent in order to settle the ETH that he wants to get back. So he needs to settle the lock on optimism, and for that you need to read cross-chain state, right? And if you want to do this in a complex way, you want to be able to fulfill very complex intents on many networks. You need a standardized way of querying this data across any network, and I think we are perfectly positioned for that.
This just kind of blew my mind a little bit. Once it clicked, I was like, oh, I get it. Because if the funds, like, as long as the solver doesn't care whether their ETH lives somewhere else, like, it's fine. Like, they can just basically,
as long as they,
change hands.
As long as there's like a credible commitment that they can get their money back after X amount of time, all they need to be paid for is the opportunity cost of having that funds locked up for 10 minutes or whatever it is, right? With SEDA, maybe a minute or 30 seconds. Yes, you got it. You just got CA pilled.
I love it. Yeah. That's pretty wild, because to me, it almost makes me feel like bridges are obsolete at that point, but I'm sure there'll be maybe some use case for them still. Like,
asset bridges.
And I've heard of this.
Just play a part because that other chain had to get there somehow in the first place for this to even be possible. Yeah.
Have you guys ever used the cross?
Yep.
I have. I actually just used it recently.
So this is how a cross works.
I see. And that's why it's so fast and cheap.
Yeah. It's just a solver taking the other side on the bridge. And what's really cool.
Is it centralized?
No. It's super decentralized. Because the solvers, I think, are permissionless entities. I don't know exactly how their solver mechanism works. But there's many. And they use their own oracle, UMA, as the settlement oracle, which is cool, but the problem there is you can only settle on ETH. And the second thing is, which is expensive. And the second thing is that because it's a subjective oracle, it's quite slow. So those are sort of like the trade-off. So it's a little bit more capital intensive, than, I think is necessary, but it's a lovely solution. I use it all the time.
Cool. So I guess, Timmy, did you have any other questions kind of related to this, or did you want to ask any other questions? I had like one thing I was kind of curious about.
Is that one other thing related to this, or kind of
it's separate? It's kind of a separate topic.
Go for it. No, I'm good on this front. Tank, I guess. We'll turn to you real quick. You're sort of our guinea pig of most in the dark here. So how are you feeling?
I'm feeling really intrigued. I want to dive into this a little bit more on my own and kind of poke around. But yeah, it's really, I think.
Wait, actually, I remember what I was going to say specific to you, Tank. You're in an interesting position where perhaps it's a pipe dream, perhaps it will happen within months, who knows, but like you're actually somewhat like thinking about and talking about sort of taking over and managing an entire blockchain. And from that perspective, Oracle's data, connection to other chains, connection to off-chain, you don't need to answer right now, but maybe thinking about it from that perspective. Let's pretend that went through and you had sort of some leadership position or control over Juno. Oracles would obviously be a big part of what's needed to turn it into something thriving. Yeah, I don't know. What would you maybe ask from that perspective, or want to know, or integrate? And you don't have to answer.
So,
maybe chew on.
If you put me on the spot, Avi. No, you can't.
Yeah. Well, no. Feel free to think on that. But I think you are in a interesting spot for this sort of discussion. You've also built a couple like sort of consumer facing products. They haven't integrated oracles, but you're of that mindset, you know.
Yes, and you actually hit the nail right on the head. Unfortunately, I do not want to speak out of turn just yet because that is something that is in the process, and I don't want to jump the gun or make anybody anxious or too bullish when it doesn't need to be. But you're hitting it right on the head. My thought process and the reason why I was saying I'm so intrigued and I just want to listen a little bit more and figure things out a little bit more is because that is the direction my mind was going with everything. I think there's huge use cases, and what I was going to say earlier, I think the thing that you hit right on the head earlier is when you said that definitions or terms, keep getting defined differently as this space evolves, right? And the term Oracle, as I'm listening to you guys, has definitely turned a new meaning for myself, or definition for me personally, especially getting a lot more involved, possibly on those level that you were speaking of when it comes to a chain. But yeah, no, it's absolutely right. Again, unfortunately, I don't want to really elaborate any more than just that, but it's super, super, super. Yeah, Alvy's laughing at me. It's super, super interesting, and I think it would be super beneficial as well.
You can always,
Super cool.
actually,
we can async this as well.
Juno's dead. Juno's dead. I'm of the camp that Juno just needs to die a slow death. So I'm gonna ask the next question that I had, which is, you guys have kind of hinted at, proof of concepts and like other partners that you may be working with in the upcoming kind of like technical rollout. So I was wondering, Jasper, like, can you speak to any of those partnerships? I can also kind of throw the rollout tweet that Peter had wrote in the nest so people can read through that. Cause I think it's a lot of info, probably easy to just like reference it.
Yeah, it will be great.
You want to speak to any of like the use cases you're passionate about, or you think are going to be really big?
Yeah, so I can definitely speak to the sort of like categories of use cases. We've announced some hints, like some super, super specific hints on partnerships. Like we just announced that we're working with One Balance on their CA solution. But we're keeping most of the partnerships announcements a little bit closer to our chest until we have the first proof of concept built. But I can definitely speak on the verticals that we're chasing, right? And I think after this conversation, most of this is going to seem pretty obvious, but very happy to sort of like go over which categories of applications I'm excited about, and we'll definitely early launch partner integrations with. So the first one to hit, just to run it home, is CA, chain abstraction. We just talked about it. Don't need to mince any more words, but we're talking to probably all of the top CA projects, and most of them really get it, and that's amazing. So that's great. Then the second category is obviously DeFi, and specifically in tandem with RaaS, so rollups as a service. You've got RaaS providers that want to offer as many tooling to their clients as possible so that they can launch a chain as feature complete as possible, right? So we're talking to a bunch of RaaS providers of being able to just click a button and launch SEDA with a relayer or with a solver when you deploy a new rollup. So you launch with being interoperable using one of our partners, and like all of the data feeds that we have, so including price feeds, etc. So you can immediately have a flourishing developer ecosystem because A, your interoperability, so you have access to liquidity, and B, you have access to data, so that's developers have the sort of like the building blocks that they need. Then the third one that we are prioritizing is actually real world assets. I always like to sort of like throw this out there, but real world assets literally have sort of like the reason why you need oracles in the name. It's real world. Like you need to bridge data from the real world onto these networks, in order to, create anything sort of like meaningful, right? Otherwise, I mean, it's literally impossible to build a real world assets protocol without having a bridge to the real world, right? So we're working with a bunch of those. What that means is like, think asset tokenization, and also some identity partners, actually. So people building sort of like privacy protocols, allowing people to have almost like an abstracted on-chain identity that's living in a central, sort of like, not decentralized, but in one single network. Using SEDA as a distribution mechanism to prove certain, characteristics or attributes of your identity on many chains, which allows you to sort of like bridge over reputation, I don't know, qualify for cross-chain airdrops, that type of stuff.
Oh, that's interesting. I wonder if there's like any sort of application for sibling, because that's like a huge thing right now with airdrops, obviously. Like being able to prove that you're an actual like user versus just some sort of like Sybil farm.
Yeah, 100%. I think that is definitely a possibility. I think what you can almost do is like have like shared, I'm immediately thinking of like, scary use cases with WorldCoin, etc. Because essentially WorldCoin is doing something similar there. We have like just proof of human.
Yeah.
Yep. But what you want to do is like have like proof of being human and user, proof of human and user, sort of like what you're trying to get to with like these, to create.
You also want like proof, non-specific proof of human. Like I want to prove I'm a human, but not which one I am, you know?
Yeah. And for that actually, like, I mean, I said WorldCoin scary, and it is, but it honestly, their technology is pretty cool. It does exactly that. If they're not lying to us, then it does exactly what you just said. It just says like, hey, it just proves you are a human, a unique human, but that's it.
There is one other thing that I guess is like not exactly, I guess it is related to chain abstraction. There was a tweet that Peter put out that kind of like illustrated the route complexity, or at least like handling routes at scale, and how SEDA is kind of like positioned to do that really well compared to other chains. I was curious, like, does SEDA like reduce the route complexity, or is it simply kind of designed to handle the massive number of routes at scale?
By doing...
And do you know which tweet I'm talking about?
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. By doing the latter,
okay,
the result is the former. So by being able to serve any route, you make the route complexity, you decrease route complexity, because what you're seeing now is that if there is a asset bridge that supports 6 chains and another asset bridge that supports 6 other chains, you need to like weave routes in and out across these different bridge providers. It just gets really, really complex really easily. Or you have to, so the idea is that if every chain is directly connected to another chain through SEDA, you always have a one hop solution, right? Where if I have a bridge route, so let's say we have, okay, let me try to give an example here. So we have chain ABC, and we have, this is going to be hard to do verbally. I need to think this out through a little bit more. But the idea is basically that by creating one hop routes between any chain, because they're all using the same standard, you never have to do multiple hops. And what you're seeing today is many times you need to do multiple hops to get to a certain chain across different other chains in order to get somewhere, right? So you have Blast has a bridge, and then maybe there's like a Blast L3. Ethereum cannot bridge directly to the Blast L3. You'll always first have to bridge the Blast, and then from Blast to the Blast L3. Let's say let's take that as an example, right? Where with the sort of like content connectivity standard that Peter was describing, if on the Blast L3, SEDA is enabled, and on Ethereum, SEDA is enabled, then you can, in theory, prove state across both these chains immediately.
I think the example that I had seen in like one of your docs was like having SEDA be like the main road, and then each of like the contract deployments kind of be a driveway to the home, with like the home being the blockchain. So it's just really that like one connection that needs to exist. So you don't have to kind of like go through all these different routes in order to kind of like,
that has a,
verify things.
That metaphor has Peter written all over it. Sounds right.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I think, I guess the only other thing I was curious about, like SEDA is not going to be providing data. you're basically just creating the marketplace for this data. And the token is basically used kind of as a medium of exchange for like between consumers and providers of this data. Is that correct?
Yeah. Okay.
This was going to be my last question too, is let's chat about the token real quick. So take it away.
Sure. So SEDA token has multiple utilities. First of all, you stake it to secure the network, or you stake it to be able to be paid to provide query and compute to the network. You earn fees for the compute that the network does. And then secondary, we're working on OEV solutions with another partner. I've been referencing some of their stuff in some of my tweets. That is building application level MEV solutions that essentially allows us to distribute any OEV we generate across a distribution that our community wants, that feels fair. So a lot of it will go back to the app, some of it will go to SEDA, and then within SEDA it will be distributed as well. So any MEV that's caused by SEDA will be captured and will be returned for the most part to the users. And then are we a data provider? We're not a data source, but you still need us to get, we're more of a data distributor. Like we're like a highway, I'd say, not the source.
I mean, I think
right. So like
similar to many, by definition, infrastructure projects, right? Other oracles, like I don't think Chainlink provides data, for example, that third parties do as nodes. It's similar with you guys, right?
Yeah, it's middleware, right? It's where you sit in the middle. And I think
it's both the marketplace and the infrastructure. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think the thing to really like put my foot down here is like getting good data is hard. Like creating good data is hard. We couldn't do that. We don't have the bandwidth to work on distribution and creating the data. It's just really, really difficult. So we're very happy to just partner with some of the best data providers out there and then allow people to sort of like create redundancy through customizability that we enable. So that's how I see that.
Yeah, somewhat comparable to like not layer 2 in the chain sense, but a second level DeFi aggregation product, right? Where whether it's to help with yield farming or aggregating multiple dexes, again, it's sort of tapping into work that's done by specialized parties. You know, in your case, data providers, in my example, let's say dexes with liquidity pools. And it's just enhancing that experience for the end user, for builders, for whoever needs to kind of tap in, and just make these things more accessible. In your case.
Yeah. In the DeFi parallel that you just pulled, I think being able to create your own strategy would be the equivalent.
Cool. Okay, so one last specific question. I know we're going a little over on time here. We can wrap it up. Back to like the SEDA token. So in addition to the network things, with it being an L1, for actual data, like payments, transactions in the marketplace, so to speak, is any of that rerouted to stakers as a sort of revenue share type thing? Yep. Okay. So how does that work? In brief, we can keep it simple.
So a percentage of it will probably be burned. That's one. So in theory, stakers will make money because they earn inflation. And as the token gets burned, that inflation will be more valuable because there's less supply. So that's one way to look at it. Secondly, the overlay nodes, so the nodes that do query and compute, will earn a small fee for their work, right? It's a super light program. It's really not expensive to run. It's really not expensive or hard to set up. So they'll be earning fees as well. And then yes, every compute instruction in SEDA, just as Ethereum, will cost money, and it will all be denominated in SEDA. Through it being intent-based, what's really cool is that when you issue a data request on an L1 or L2, you can pay in any token. The only thing is that the solver will need to settle in SEDA, right? So
that's cool.
yeah, the solvers will be able to say like, hey, I'm willing to take USDC for a small spread. And then I have my own inventory of SEDA, and I will convert the USDC to SEDA at some point later whenever I feel like that's a good idea. Or they can be delta neutral SEDA USDC or whatever.
Yeah.
People are really smart with these capital market things.
Okay, cool. That makes a ton of sense. That also, on top of buying pressure from adoption of project, that just creates buying pressure through more flexibility on the end user in paying whatever they want, and then somewhere in the background that's getting converted to SEDA in some sense.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We don't want wrapped SEDA on every chain.
Yeah.
That's dangerous, first of all, because you distribute your value across like all of these different networks. So I think this is the way to go.
Cool. Okay, then on that,
The real question is, Timmy, are you going to sell any of your link to buy SEDA after this day?
I mean, I probably won't sell any because it's staked and it's a pain to get in the staking pool, but I definitely may pick up some SEDA. What was my last question there?
I'm definitely going to pick up some SEDA.
There you go. Yeah. Actually, Tank, do you want to chime in with anything? Feel free not to.
No. Like I said, I'm just been quietly listening, trying to soak it all in. But like, man, just by listening to it as an investor, like, bro, not financial advice, but yeah, I'm picking up some for sure.
Yeah, I think the thing
For sure.
I'll say this mainly as maybe helpful to you guys in terms of what maybe an investor would look for this specific niche in the market. I think product outline, game plan, we didn't get to touch on roadmap too much, but we mentioned a couple things. In general, sounds phenomenal. The thing I would focus on, why listen to me? But like to further sell me on SEDA, personally, I would want to see some action on the BD and like adoption.
Yeah.
Because it's clear that what you have is fantastic, but it's now working in this industry professionally, I see a lot of projects are hesitant to change, right? They're like, your option might be better, but we're already using X Oracle or whatever. So the core product, I'm pretty much sold. I just want to see the marketing side of things be successful and see that adoption start to tick up. Yeah.
Well, you just touched on the next checkpoint on the roadmap, which is having the first integrations announced and launched with on testnet. So that's great to hear that we're aligned there.
Awesome. Is there a rough timeline? Actually, maybe this will be our closing thing. Do we have sort of a rough timeline? Don't want to lock you guys into any dates, obviously, but what are we sort of looking at for the next couple months here with SEDA?
So within the next 4 weeks, we're going to start onboarding the first integrations on testnet. And within the next 3 to 4 months, we want to see them live on mainnet.
Okay, awesome. So we caught you guys at a good time.
Yeah, so Q3, Q4 of 2024 is my understanding.
That's what we're targeting.
Yeah. So the tweet that's up right now in the Nest is the chain abstraction tweet, but the tweet right before that is the entire roadmap starting, at the first iteration all the way to mainnet. So it's got some timelines. It's basically got feature rollouts all packed into there. I mean, we could have gone through it. I just feel like it's the type of thing that when you read the tweet, it's probably easier to see.
Yeah, if I was just reading the roadmap, I don't think that wouldn't be the best use of our time. I think diving deep into the technology is why we did this, and I think it was fantastic, guys. It was a great conversation.
Totally agree.
Yeah. No. Thanks for making it, Jasper. I appreciate it. And hopefully, I think Tank says he wants to say something. He's got his hand up.
Yeah, I got a dumb question. Maybe I shouldn't ask this just yet.
There's no such thing.
Where are you guys expecting to get your token out there? Like, where can investors, where can people that want to buy it expect to be able to find it?
So
do you guys have an idea yet?
There's 2 methods now. There's osmosis, and so because we launched these previous Oracle products, we had this token called Flux, which is still trading on Ethereum, which is 1-to-1 convertible to SEDA using our migration interface. So depending on where you can get the better price, there's about equal liquidity in both pools. Those 2 places would be the place to pick up SEDA today.
Wait, what network was Flux on?
It was on Near, Aurora, FMOS, few more.
I don't think I made that connection.
That's
I
why
think
we
I
do
have
that.
some Flux actually. I don't think I
Well,
realized that was
that's
you
why.
guys now. Okay. Cool.
Dude, I think you and I had this conversation before, and you were talking about a different Flux token.
Oh, okay, yes, yeah.
Because this is
Yeah.
FLX.
Yeah, not
yeah.
Quant Flux.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thing.
We did. Thank you, Bobby. Yes,
Yeah.
total deja vu there. I wasn't sure if it was
Yeah,
deja
sorry.
vu or.
One of the reasons we pivoted away from the Flux branding was because it was just getting a little bit crowded.
Yeah, it's a. Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, well, maybe a lighthearted, easy question to end on. What is SEDA? SEDA. What is that name? Where does that token ticker come from? That can maybe be our wrap-up point.
Yeah, of course. So we thought it didn't mean anything, which was the reason why we picked it. It's an abbreviation of secure data. And we thought like, okay, doesn't really mean a lot, but it means silk in Spanish and Portuguese as well. So we were a little bit disappointed. I live in Portugal now and I see SEDA like way too many times, but
you could have gotten more unlucky with a word that fit. That's sort of a generic and slick enough word though, where you just gotta, how can we work this in? But cool.
Exactly.
Okay, awesome.
I will say, I think you guys have like some of the best branding I've seen in the space. So I think the Silk name kind of, it's like the branding silky smooth.
Oh yeah.
Actually, I was on your website earlier. You're right. Even just your logo, some of the animations with your branding, it is indeed silky feeling. So not too bad a fit.
There you go. Yeah. No, that.
If you guys don't mess with the Zohan on a meme somewhere where he wants his hair to be silky smooth, I'm gonna be
Thiago.
I want my hair to be SEDA smooth.
SEDA smooth. That's
Thiago, like, come on. Why are we not doing this already? Come on. This is the move. Amazing.
Awesome. Okay, well, this has been so fun. Jasper, thank you for joining. I know a couple other SEDA team members have been in the audience. Appreciate you guys chiming in, all of our other audience members. TerraSpaces wasn't able to make this one, but we are recording. He always goes back and picks them up. So if anyone who missed this, it will be available on his site, here on Twitter, and probably on Interchain Info. And as always, would love to maybe chat with you guys again in a couple months. Maybe when most stuff's moved to mainnet, we have some partnership announcements. We can do a sort of follow-up, see where we're at.
LFG.
Cool. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining this episode of Chain Chat. Make sure to check out SEDA on Interchain Info if you want a bit more info. They're both in the index as well as quite a few articles in the resource hub. They have some awesome videos on their YouTube. And keep an eye on them and give them a follow on Twitter. The SEDA account isn't in here actually, but I assume it's in all of their bios. So just hop to Jasper's account, give him a follow, give SEDA a follow. And remember to join us next week, maybe at a different time, but always on a Thursday. We'll have Chain Chat episode 10 and we'll announce who the guest or topic is going to be pretty soon here. So thanks for tuning in, everyone. Thanks for joining Jasper. Thanks for setting this up, Avi. Thanks for helping co-host as always, Tank. And we will catch you all next time.
Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
Have a good week, everybody.
See ya.